cutie.
Good morning. How's everybody?
Good.
My mom would say fair to
Good.
middle.
Fair to always fair to
Yeah. Well, last week we tackled a very ambiguous parable, right? The persistent widow and the unjust judge. And we talked about that a little bit and we dug into it and we realized that the judge was not supposed to represent God. It was the kind of story rhetorical device of saying, well, this horrible judge grants her mercy, how much better is God, right? And so we had a good conversation around what that means and what it means to be persistent and uh, why we still have to wait for Jesus's return and for God to finish what we started. So I said, let's go from that one last week to this week. Let's have a conversation about a very well-known parable. One of the ones that most people know, maybe even not Christians have heard of this one. That is the prodigal son. So last week we have this judge who doesn't respect God or care about people. And this widow wears him down through her persistence and just plain annoying him. And he doesn't want his reputation to, get hit because he can't handle this woman. And that's this interesting picture. I wanted to put alongside it this one of the prodigal son, of this father saying, "No, welcome back, open arms, throw a party." So this very kind of contrast of personalities, these two parables. So this we're going to include this as part of a set of three parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. Other gospels leave out the prodigal son. Luke is the only one who adds that story. So we'll get it. We'll do a real quick pass through of the first two lost parables, and then we'll get into the prodigal son. And one thing that I'll just share right now that hits me with the prodigal son story, or at least this time reading it, and that's the power of parables too, is every time you hear it, come back to it, different translation, different speaker or voice, different year or season in your life, something else will hit you, or some other part of the story or the meaning will open up for you. What gets me this time was while the son was still far off, the father runs out to welcome. Right? Sees him from a distance. So what does that say about God's grace, especially compared to last week where we have this sort of waiting for God? We need to be persistent in prayer. So just to set the stage. Before we get into that, to help set the stage with all of you, got any stories about something important that you lost? I know my mom lost her wedding ring digging in the garden one time. Had to wait a while, but eventually my dad got her a different ring, and it wasn't diamond; it was sapphire. It was the birthstone. She wore that out. So it could be, or it could be that you lost something and later found it, or you lost it and never got it back. But what's the story of something that was important to you that was lost?
That's easy, my youth.
Does anybody have a drum set? Yeah, I was thinking more of an object, but that's very valid, very valid.
And I'm not getting that back.
It's not good.
It was a tiny dog might be able to bring. I just woke up and told me it was gone. Oh. So. She never found it.
And how did that feel?
Well, it's very sad, it's an important ring for you. For me, and, it wasn't fun.
How long ago was this?
Oh, it was about the time Nathan was born, I guess, so it's been 4 years ago.
So at some point you kind of got at least to some acceptance of this.
Well, Scott, she still talks about it.
Well, I asked. Okay. How long do you think it took before you weren't feeling as bad?
It's hard to look back on. That's right. I still kind of want it.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Something you lost?
Can you lose a person?
That, I'm gonna ask that one later.
Oh.
Yeah. But yes. So. I have a very small superpower. I usually know where things are. Even if it's a mess, even if it was a long time ago, I just kind of have this internal compass sense, I know where this is or where it should be. And so there's still stuff from when I was in high school that when we go back home, I still have this urge to find it because it bothers me so much. And it's something dumb. It's notes from Spanish class, but my kids take Spanish now. And I have 2 notebooks full of vocabulary and grammar, and their teachers have left some stuff out. And I was just like, I wish I could just take this and give it to them. And it still bugs me that probably my mom threw it away at some point. Should have brought it with me earlier on.
That's right.
But the fact is, I know it exists. I know it where it should be.
Wait, you talk about that. When I was in college, I was transferred to Minneapolis Institute of Art to, and you have to turn in a portfolio and you have to turn in, references, one of your banker. And, because it's affiliated with the Museum of Art in Minneapolis. And I had a portfolio about that big. And when I left, I got drafted and went to service and stayed at home. My folks got divorced and they burned it. So,
What?
yeah.
So it wasn't just
Well, they
lost.
sold it or got rid of it, they threw it away somehow.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
They threw it away, so. So I lost my portfolio, but I was turning to school, which got me into school, but then I got drafted, so.
But still, that,
But as a parent who's cleaned out their kids' stuff, I've told my kids, if you want this, come get it. And I give them a date, and if not, it's
Well,
gone. And
I
I've done
had the
that.
choice, I wasn't home.
Parents, well.
but there's a
parents hold
difference
on to stuff
between,
like
there's a
that.
difference between maybe some papers from school and like the portfolio.
Probably know that, you know, and she just knew it was his junk and he didn't take it with him.
And they sold my
Different
car.
perspectives on it.
That's a mother's perspective.
Yeah.
And they sold my car too, because it was in their name, because I had a good driving record, so it was in their name to keep insurance going. I went to service and they sold my car.
Portfolio.
That, I keep remembering that. Oh, yeah, it was a good 4-inch set of pen and ink and charcoal.
So yeah, sometimes it's something that you just lost, like it's gone, where'd it go? And sometimes somebody took it, that's a different feeling. Prodigal son kind of touches on both. But back on objects, because we're gonna start with I'm gonna categorize the sheep as an object for now. I know some people are really attached to their pets, but right now it's just a sheep. So sheep and coin, we're gonna talk about with this object. So any other lost items or things?
Not two, but one that was actually something that was my son.
Oh,
He used to write stories because he was in a writing class, an advanced writing class. But he went out to the river with his friends, and the notebook went into the river and they never got it. So the only place that we had the stories are right here. So at least we have that part, but it was like, oh man. And he doesn't think it's a big deal, but man, for us, it was a really precious story.
yeah.
I was,
You said you had 2?
Oh, the second one was my college ring. I was coaching soccer over St. Mary's and stuck it in my jacket pocket. And when the practice was over, it was gone.
Oh,
So, you know, I decided to go buy another one. And then 2 years later, a guy was with a metal detector, they were tearing up everything,
No way.
rebuilding. He called me and said, I found this, is this yours? Because it had my mother's address, it's not mine.
Oh.
Yeah, so,
Didn't have mine too.
that's.
and somehow he tracked, I guess he must have called the school and that's how he got me, so.
So how did it feel to lose it and how did it feel to get it back 2 years later?
But I got it. Because the newer one is actually smaller, but I got the old one, but it was a different color than the new one, so
Yeah.
I'm more attached to the old.
That might be one of the biggest smiles I've ever seen on your face.
Very similar thing. It only cost me $50 to get it back.
Yeah.
You know, now if you look at these rings and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
yes, the college rings are like $2,600.
Yeah.
I don't know how easy does it.
Most people don't.
Yes.
I did lose her in high school. I did do that.
Okay, I was thinking just easy stories, but we're like, I lost somebody else's thing, somebody else lost everything that was special to me, getting things back. All right, Donna, what were you gonna say?
Well, this is when my kid's dad passed away. All of his West Point stuff and so forth. His wife at the current time, she kept it and the boys didn't get it. And I was more mad about it than that. And Patrick said, Mom, it's just stuff. He said, the only thing I really want is my dad back and I can't have it. The rest of it is stuff.
Yeah.
And so every time you get thinking about possessions,
Mhm.
think about, is that really
Sure.
what you really want?
Yeah. Sometimes the stuff is so infused with the person that it's hard to separate. But yeah, my mom, when her mom died, there were certain things that she just really wanted because it just meant it had so much stuff of her mom attached to it. There's a clock. There was this there was a dumb cuckoo clock that was in my grandma's house, but it was grandma's, like, you know, that it was her personality and all that. So I hear what you're saying, and sometimes it's hard to pull it up. All right, now we're in the mindset of a lost thing. Okay, could somebody? Oh, do we have Bibles? We're doing a Bible study, folks. Let's get those Bibles out. Thank you, Susan. All right, we're gonna be in Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 7. So verses 1 and 2 frame all three of these together. And then verses 3 through 7 is the first parable. So I'm gonna just say Darren or Valerie.
Yeah.
Could one of you do verses 1 through 7?
We got it.
15, Luke 15.
Now the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable.
Real quick, that's just a big, conjunctions don't get a lot of attention. But how does that verse 3 start with you? What word? Then? Mine starts with so.
Then,
So then verse is so all these sinners, Pharisees and
man welcomes sinners and eats with them.
was grumbling, and then mine says, so he told them this parable.
Then Jesus told them this parable.
It's a little different, but okay, sorry, that's a
So
big,
big word.
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent.
Thank you. According to the scholars, with that big of a herd, it would have been multiple people working together, maybe family members or neighbors. And so if you lost that one sheep, you better go find it because it's not just yours. It's part of this group's. And would you have a party at the end? You sure would, because you need to have that celebration that it was restored for the sake of the group. So much in the Bible is based on that community and that honor system. So if this affects the whole community, then you're going to celebrate it and you're going to do the work together. And then these parables don't start off with the kingdom of God is like, but at the end here it says, it gives us a picture that there will be more joy over one sinner who repents. So that's still giving us a picture of what the kingdom of God or kingdom of heaven or whatever phrase you want to use. Okay, could somebody read verses 8 through 10?
Sure. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents.
Thank you. Okay, for this one, the background would be. Well, first, it's really dark, so yes, you need a light to search, because there's no electric lights or anything. But once she finds it, this always struck me as weird, or why would you have a party with your neighbors? Is this just Jesus exaggerating for the parable? But according to the experts, you might throw the party, you might go tell your neighbors to make sure that, well, if this coin, this was like a denarius, right? This was like a day's wages, as we know from other parables. If that got lost, that could cause some issues. There could be a ripple effect. So by her finding it, she's gonna tell her neighbors, celebrate with me. I found this, and now no one's gonna think she stole it. Right? There's a public community party to say, I found the coin that was lost. Anybody, so no, leaves no room for doubt.
And it wasn't just the side thing, it said it was worth about 1 day's wages.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a quarter of
Right,
it.
right,
Yeah.
This is a big deal.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I don't know how this plays, but well, shepherds, as maybe you know from the Christmas stories, they were pretty low on the social order. Nobody liked shepherds. As this says, shepherds were a despised occupational group. But shepherds were men. The second one is about this woman telling her other, probably women neighbors. So I don't know what that means, but we have the men who lost the sheep and get it back, and they celebrate. So does heaven. The woman who lost the coin celebrates with her, the other women neighbors. That's that shows a picture of heaven. So for me, this is saying from whatever aspect of life you're in, men or women, which was a big separation at the time, out in the fields or in the town, low on the social order, or at least in the middle of the social order. It doesn't matter. If something's lost, heaven's going to rejoice when it's. Any other thoughts or questions on these two parables? Just thinking in what the stories we told, what it felt like to lose something, and it might still bug you today, or you might be saying, "This isn't important. I need to let this go," but you still remember the thing that was lost, right? And the feelings that go with it. So Jesus tells these two parables about things being lost: a sheep that wandered off, or just just sat still and was a stubborn sheep, or what have you, for whatever reason it was gone, or a coin that had monetary value. Both of these affect the community around you. So maybe the things that you all shared stories about that were lost didn't affect maybe your neighbors, but it affected your family, your spouse, your kid. So it's not just like, oh man, like for me, the reason that I'm bugged about my Spanish notes is a little bit because I just me being stubborn, right? Like I know they're supposed to be there, why aren't they there? But it's also because I wanted to take them to give to my kids. And I really thought it would be of value to them as they're taking 6 years with Spanish. So it's not just like you lost a sock, like the dryer ate your sock, right? It's not that you dropped a penny. It's not that you left your cup on top of the car and it fell down, right?
Been there, done that.
Right? So these stories of being lost, take those feelings that we have of knowing that something is gone that you miss, or the significance attached to it, and then it has ripple effect that it's going to affect more than just you.
Okay, I thought of something Bob lost at boxes, silver dollars, and it was a little box like this, and he always kept it in this top floor of his dresser. Well, it just appeared to be gone all of a sudden. We didn't remember whether we had done anything with it. He always kept it in the same place. Well, they were lost for a long time. We asked lots of people in our household if they'd seen a box. No one had seen the box. And so it occurred to us that we had moved and the box had been in the top drawer of the dresser, and couldn't it be possible that someone pulled the drawer out and took what was in there? And all of a sudden, that was the way it happened. In our minds, someone had stolen those coins from us, and it was the movers that had been to move the furniture. And it developed an attitude that was a good attitude, right? Well, the coin showed up. My oldest son, who lives out of state, had them. His dad had given them to him.
Oh,
Still remember.
And everybody
I
forgot.
didn't remember, but it was the attitude
Yeah.
that I was left with. And,
Yeah.
I felt sort of bad that I accused someone who had nothing to do with my coins.
Aren't you glad you didn't call a movie company though?
Right, another layer. If it's lost, maybe somebody took it. All right. Now, as we move, so you keep all of this. Hold it close. Now we take the next step to the third term. We move from a thing to a person. And if losing a thing, thinking it was stolen or somebody else's thing, brings up these feelings. Now we move to a person. Now in this instance, it's not losing somebody to death, although that is definitely a way we lose people. This one is an estrangement situation. But now can you tell a story about someone important to you that you've lost? If you feel comfortable. If you want to talk about a specific person or just the feeling of it, if it's somebody who was estranged from your family that you were able to reconcile with, find them, what was that feeling? Or if it's somebody who died and there was unresolved things, were you able to ever come to some kind of closure? Like where is the final part for that?
I can do it for that. My mom divorced in 1960.
Mhm.
And of course, she never had anything to do with my ex, or her ex's family, which is my, yeah. Anyway, when my mom died at the age of 90 in 18 or 19 of this century, I got back there and she wanted to be buried with my two dead brothers. So that's where we put her. Well, it's in this church that I was confirmed, was baptized in, and everything is still there. And I was out there looking at my grandfather's tombstone, which I hadn't seen in probably 30 years. And the preacher comes out of the parsonage and he looks at me like I got two heads. I said, well, I'm sorry if I'm intruding here. I just want to take a picture of my grandfather's tombstone. He looks at me and he says, that's your grandfather? And I said, yeah. He says, it's mine too. So the preacher was my second cousin. And then I went, and then he called some other relatives and they all came down to talk to me. And I finally met my shorter side of the family. The house that I was born on, my dad was born on, my brother was born on, and everything is still in the family, so it's a 100-year-old farm. And it's my second cousin that owns that, and I got to meet him and go to the house that I grew up in. So,
Like 60 years later.
yeah, it's 60 years later, and that's the first time I've had any dealing with that side of the family in over 60 years, or more longer than that, yeah, 60 years, yeah.
How did that feel?
I was elated.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
I
didn't
lost
even
my
know you
mom.
were six.
That was mixed emotions. I lost my mom, but I gained another half a family. So I don't know, it's kind of a, kind of odd. I mix those two.
Yeah.
And I didn't associate with that side of the family out of respect for my mom, because she didn't want me to do that, so I didn't. And after she was gone, I felt relieved that I didn't have to live up to that promise that I gave her. So it opened up the doors.
Thank you. Any others?
Well, I was saying that I lost my mother, but not by death. I mean, surely she did die, but I lost her years before because of her depression. It was as if she no longer belonged, but she was there, but she didn't belong to us any longer. So I don't know that that counts for anything.
It does. Depression, dementia, Alzheimer's.
But I mean, in the context that we're talking about.
It does. I mean, that's the grounded part of Jesus's parables, is it taps into something that people know. And it could be agriculture or sheep or relations with your neighbors. But it's also with the mustard seed, it ends with, it grows big enough to provide shade for all the birds. That taps into a deep need that everybody feels to be safe and to belong somewhere. Things and people that are lost, everybody has experienced some kind of loss or grief. So, yeah, that's completely valid, because it's in a way even more painful, because there they are. They're right there. But for whatever reason, emotional, physical health, you don't, or I have a sister I haven't talked to in a few years. Just regular old estrangement, the whole family, it's like. Nothing you can do about it. You might be able to say like, well, two-way street, we tried, or whatever, you can rationalize all these things. But it's still a part of your life that you don't have access to, it's still lost.
Yeah, I can relate to this, like I said, because I didn't know how that family was gonna relate to me.
Right.
Because I was sort of like a product of something, and I was expecting some pushback.
Yeah.
From some of them, why don't you get in touch with sooner, they're gonna, you know where we are, but they didn't do that, so I got nothing but positive feedback, which is shocking me, because I was expecting just the opposite.
Has anybody gone through maybe the other side of things where, like Roger's second cousin and family, like, were you that family and somebody is estranged or left or something happened, some rift in the family or the relationships? Were you able to find the lost person? Were you able to rebuild the bridge or reconcile?
More embarrassed I didn't try.
Well, there, I get that. I also understand why you didn't. I can't tell if it's nobody has a story or if these are very personal stories. Maybe a little both. Well, clearly though, the mood in the room changed. So while you're thinking about that, while we're in that realm, let's read the parable of the prodigal son. We can also think if it needs, is that the name it should have? The prodigal son, maybe there's other names we can have. Luke chapter 15, we can break it into two. Let's have somebody do 11 to 24 and then somebody pick up 25 to 32.
Then Jesus said there was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in his desolate living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger. I would get up and go to my father, and I would say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate."
Thank you. The parable could very easily just end right there. And it keeps going. Who would like to do the next
Oh, now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, "Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound." Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I would celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured the fatted calf, oh, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Then the father said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and he has been found.
This is one of the longest stories in the Gospels. That just hit me. This is long. None of Jesus's parables are this long. Very few. There's a whole lot in here that I'm just not gonna get into. I will just share that instead of calling it the parable of the prodigal son, they call it greed destroys a family and its place in the village. And they get into all this stuff about how the inheritance never should have been given. It broke all of these rules and brought dishonor on the family. The guy does spend it all and comes back, and the father rushes out to meet him before the townspeople go after him. It does all this stuff.
It's a lot of inferring.
But it's inferring, but it's also based on other writings and other archaeological stuff from the contemporary era. So they back it up. They tell you where they get their information from. From their perspective, it takes this well-beloved parable of the prodigal son and says, well, let's tell you how the father messed up and both brothers messed up and everything, like they break it down. I think at the end of the day, I'm not going to get into all this because at the end of the day, the point is still there. Despite the mistakes of everybody, the father runs out to bring the son back in. And there's this reunion and this celebration. If you are curious, I'll happily share this with you later.
It's very much like a family relationship. I mean, the whole thing, I can see my sons at one point in it. And that interaction between families, sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not.
It's a higher level too. It's like you could be the duty bad boy for years and repent and you're back in good graces with Christ. So works on the same principle.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the justification for all the deathbed.
That's what I was gonna say. You beat me to it, but that's what I was gonna say with the Catholics. You know.
Well, it's not just Catholics, but
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that's the one most known.
But I just wonder, I mean, Luke chronicles all these parables and, so we have them, but you don't know the context in which Jesus used them originally, because, that may have had some, it may have meant more, or
Sure.
the situation that he was in when he was wrapped around, could have made this make a lot more sense.
Definitely. That's why if you read like some classic literature, right? They'll have an introduction now, 100, 200 years later, that says this is what was going on in the author's life, in the country, the world around them. Like you might read, I don't know, like our kids right now are reading, the older kids are reading The Lord of the Flies in English. I don't know, I've never read it, I don't know much about the story, but I would be very curious to know what was going on in that author's life or in the world that made him write this book, The Lord of the Flies, or any number of things. So yeah, the situation, we get a little bit, we get the first 2 verses of chapter 15. All the tax collectors and sinners were coming here to listen to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, this fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. And then he tells bam, 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 these 3 parables. And he goes from a sheep, shepherd's book, to a coin, okay, to a son, and 2 sons, and the whole community. Invite everybody, we'll have a party. So Jesus was a good speaker, right? You know that these stories had power, and it couldn't have just been the words. He must have really drawn people in. That's an inference too, but I feel like that's a pretty safe one as we're still talking about it. So that's part of the context. The powers that be don't like who Jesus is associated with. And so he says, the kingdom of heaven, he says, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents There is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Here's a big sinner. He repents. Why are you hanging out with these, undesirables, Jesus? If you're a rabbi, if you're a teacher, why are you slumming it kind of with these tax collectors and sinners? Prostitutes get added to the list in other places.
The shepherds themselves.
The shepherds themselves. Who gets the news of the birth of the Lord first? The shepherds. Who gets the news of the resurrection of Jesus first? Some women, right? Not the people in power. And when King Herod finds out, what does he do? Oh, kill all the infants, right? So, yeah, there's a little bit of context. We have that much of people didn't like who Jesus was associating with. And Jesus' response is, we'd much rather have the lost people found. Joy in him.
I heard a clip of an interview with a singer today. I was talking about it.
Did you say a sinner?
Singer?
Oh.
Yeah, it's sinner. We all are. But he was saying if Jesus came back now, he'd be driving a Harley and hanging out in the bars. He wouldn't be at church. And I was like, when you read that, I like the description. It was very apt.
Well, we had a professor who would, and he said this multiple times. I don't know if I'm getting it exact, but the gist was, if you draw a line and you say, we're on this side, we're the Christians, we're the holy ones, we're living right. And on the other side of the line are fill in the blank, right? Jesus is going to be standing on the other side of the line. Yeah. So internally, I'm not getting into this, but internally, what's the person in your life, an individual, a group of people, anybody in your life right now could be, I'm not even gonna guess, but who is it that when you hear the name of that person or that group, your immediate reaction is, oh, right? Or you just have that immediate revulsion, or anger, or, oh, that guy, or, oh, those people. Could be a neighbor who does something with their lawn you don't like. It could be anything from the neighbor we have that just parks their cars everywhere, like all over. We can't even get in our driveway. Or it could be something like, oh, that political party.
Yes.
Or it could be, oh, that group of people over there. If you're drawing a line, Jesus is probably standing on the other side, either inviting you to say, hey, human beings over here, whether you think they're lost or not, but Jesus thinks we're all lost, right? So get uncomfortable and try to see it from Jesus's perspective. That's what he's doing. The Pharisees and the scribes are like,
When I was younger, I was more like that. The older I got, the more mellower I got, because it takes energy to do that.
it does
And
take energy, but are you telling me that this is you mellow?
Right, that's so, yeah, you should have seen me as a kid, but it takes energy to be that way, negative.
Yep.
And
I
so,
hope you're okay that I give you a hard time.
you don't know what I mean. So the energy, it takes energy to do that, and when you get older, you don't have time for that anymore.
I appreciate that. I think that's true. I also know some old people who spend a lot of energy maintaining
It's
personal grudges or.
It's not the time anymore.
Well, yeah,
In the big scheme of things, it eats nothing.
okay, so. So I'm gonna ask a little different question, or share a little different thing here, just to help think of this another way. I read a really cool book, it's called What Did They Hear? And there's this professor at, I believe it's Trinity Seminary up in Columbus, Ohio. And he was doing a preaching class or something, and he was saying, kind of what you brought up, Jeffrey, the context, right? And so he used the prodigal son story, and he was asking people in his classes, the seminary classes here in America, and then he had a chance to go work at a seminary in Tanzania, which has a ton of Lutherans, and share the stories, like, what do you hear? And then he had a chance to do a conference or something in St. Petersburg, Russia, and there was still a decent amount of people in the audience who either remembered or had the institutional memory given to them of when St. Petersburg was under siege by the Nazis and people were starving. Right? And so he did this story in all these different contexts, and each time he would say, basically, how did this happen? What happened to this son? And the folks in America all said, well, dissolute living. He went squandered his money, he blew it on, bad choices and prostitutes and all the things. So he wasted it. He brought this on himself. When he went to Tanzania, there's a line in here, and I just skimmed over it every time. There's a line in here that says, well, first, when he spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. The folks in St. Petersburg focused immediately on the famine, because they remembered what it was like to not have food.
Makes sense.
And then the next one, so he went out and hired himself out as one of the citizens. He gladly would have filled himself with the pods of the pigs, but no one gave him anything. The folks in Tanzania, who think of the history of a lot of the African nations who were at the mercy of other people doing or not doing things for them, they went on that one. They said no one gave them anything. Well, if you're in a society where you take care of everybody, where your village is the unit, right? No one took care of him. That's what happened. The rest of the community let him down. The folks in St. Petersburg said, well, it's because there was a famine. That's what happened. You know, he made mistakes, but then there was no food. And the folks in America were like, it's his own fault.
Interesting.
Right? That has stayed with me
Yeah.
forever, because all those things are right there.
Yeah,
But depending on where you're coming from, you're gonna focus in on a different detail in the story. So in that sense, now just zooming out to, well, does it matter what happened to this guy? Or how it happened? He was lost, right? Whether he did it to himself, or the community let him down, or it was a rift with his family, or it was just circumstances out of his control, like the family. What does it mean to be lost? Because we usually focus in on this guy's lost because he's a sinner. Right? That's part of the setup. But what if we expanded our definition of what it was to be lost? And to know that there is more rejoicing in heaven over somebody who was lost and is found, over a sinner who repents.
Lost, I don't have other people caring about me.
Yeah, if you're the lost one, that's probably how it
That's
feels.
wonderful.
Yeah, maybe you burned your bridge, maybe no one's helping you, but. So I just want to put that out there of what does it mean to be lost? And maybe we can broaden our definition and have a little more grace, Lutherans, about does it matter how they got to be lost? Does it matter in the long run, or does it matter that there's more joy in heaven over having them come back? So is our MO as Christians, and there's plenty of Christians in this world, especially in our country, who are really good at saying, well, let me tell you why you're lost. As opposed to saying, how can we bring you home? I think maybe that's one of the reasons why the Christian church has declined so much in our country, because the loudest Christian voices out there are the ones saying, well, here's why you're lost. Let us fix it. Or if you don't get unlost, you're going to hell. As opposed to, I see that you're lost. Let me run off while you're still a long distance away. Back. Welcome you home. Even if it's gonna tick off the brother over here who never did anything.
Yes, you feel it, because in my case, it was 60 years.
Yeah.
I didn't make an appointment. I didn't make a point to try and get in touch with them, because I figured that bridge was burned a long time ago.
Right. Somebody else burned it, they don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, they got burned a long time ago by my mom, and I didn't.
Okay.
I would say the honesty or the bravery to try and build that bridge.
Thank you, yeah.
I was, yes,
Yeah.
but that didn't make me feel any different. And older, I got older, I could have done it anytime after that, when I was an adult.
So we can keep going on this next week, because I feel like there's more to talk about. But I want to just do real quick lightning round. I have a whole bunch of questions I wanted us to dig into, and I want to start with this next week. But I'm gonna throw them out there. If you have a gut reaction to any of them, go for it, and if not, sit and stew in these questions until next week, and we'll start with it. So I just wanted to contrast how the Pharisees and the scribes saw the sinners and what the parables say about the sinners. Okay? So how exaggerated are the reactions in these parables of celebration? Are they? What are your thoughts on the older son? The second half of the parable, we didn't get that far. I called this Bible study grounded and grand. What's grounded in these passages? What can you relate to? What's grand in these passages? What's beyond your imagination? Should prodigal be the defining adjective of this parable? And lastly, is an updated version of this parable needed? That's been our exercise, right? Does this parable stand on its own still? Or is there a newer version of it, like the motorcycle box? That we could do? So any gut reactions to any of those, or do you want to just put a pin in it and come back next time?
So my first thing would be, how many people know what the definition of prodigal really is?
Right,
Most of, I mean, I always think of it as the loss, and it's not.
it's the,
The lavish, having spending money and resources freely and recklessly, wasteful, extravagant,
the wasteful son.
having given something on a lavish scale.
Yep. I imagine it comes from the same root as the word prodigious.
Absolutely, but yeah, no, I just never read that, the definition of prodigal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The way I associate with parable.
Maybe it is an adjective. All right,
Sorry, I had to.
no, that's good, that's a great, maybe that's a good place to stop, is everything we. The lens through which we do this parable, maybe we don't even know what we're talking about.
But mine's called parable lost on my Bible too, I said prodigal son in mine. But I never knew the word prodigal meant, like, I always thought it was like the lost son, the wayward son.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lost
It's a whole different perspective, right?
Lost is not the same as
No,
prodigal.
Not at all,
Wayward is a little bit.
but even then, but the lavish,
Yeah.
the spending, I would say spendthrift would be opposite, but the extravagant.
But couldn't you also call this the parable of the prodigal father? Who kills the fatted calf and pulls out the robe in the rain and
Who
has
gives
a
the son his
celebration
inheritance
for
before he,
this, gives the inheritance away and breaks with all the
and
traditions.
clearly when his son's not mature enough to handle his inheritance, and
Right.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
strings to pull in that one.
So we're prodigal in our sinning and in our mistakes. And God is even more prodigal in the grace. Like we could go lots of places with this. So sit and stew this. I talked a lot this time. I wanted to get a lot of this out there. So when we come back, I'll cede the floor. We'll start with these questions. Any requests for a short parable for next week to such do once we get through this?
I don't know if it's parable or not, it's a story in the Bible that Jesus did. I never understood it. About when Jesus saw a fig tree and there was no fig on it, and so he cursed it. I just kind of understood.
You know what? No, yeah, let's do that because Jesus cursing the fig tree, it's not a parable, but it's like a live action parable, right? And I have some, maybe some thoughts on that, and I think it could tie into this prodigal son really nicely. Because is this son producing any figs? He didn't get blasted, so yeah, we'll talk about that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for getting into some uncomfortable and maybe even painful stories or thinking about painful memories of things being lost and people being lost. And sharing your thoughts and your stories too. And we'll keep it going next time.